Well, good morning, America, and happy Labor Day to all of you out there who are hard laborers like we are here at STARS. STARS is an organization that's a nonprofit. We're here today, as we are every week now, to talk to you and get you involved in what's going on with the military and our country and finding ways where we can continue to be effective as a force to defend freedom. And to do that, we have individuals who here are part of our organization, but also some of our extremely important veterans and other people who make this happen every day for our national defense. So today, it's my honor and privilege to have with us one of the members of STARS on our advisory board, Major Chau Duc. Drew is a fellow Vietnam veteran, and most notably a Medal of Honor recipient for some very heroic actions that he had taken when he was a much younger guy. And I'm pleased to have Drew with us. Drew, sir, thanks for being part of STARS and for being with us today on the podcast.
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm proud to be a part of STARS. It's a great mission, and we all like a good mission.
Well, good missions are what we're about, isn't it, sir? And yours has been an important one, but just like everybody else that raises their hand and takes the oath to defend the nation and the Constitution, you started out just that way, raising your hand, being a part of the military. Did you know where you were going or what would happen to you at that moment?
Well, no, when you're 17 years old, you don't know much. You think you do. You think you know everything. And,
That's true.
That's quite a few years ago when just down the road from where the Center for American Values is located was the Army recruiter. And, I just thought that I needed a change. I wanted to get into the Army. My father was in the Army. We come from a long line of family members that have served. And I just felt like I wanted to be a part of that. And at 17, I'm ready. I didn't have any idea what I was getting into.
Yeah, isn't that the case usually for most of us? So when you did that, so were you fleeing the draft or were you just volunteering?
Well, I was 17, so I don't even know if I even knew what a draft was. I hadn't, uh, applied or registered, I should say. Never have registered for the draft because I was in at 17. But a lot of the guys that I met in Denver, we left from Pueblo, took a Trailways bus up to Denver, and they were draftees. A lot of young guys, a few old timers from the Korean War. They were bumping 30 and
Huh.
felt old to me. And we were on our way to Fort Leonard Wood, get into basic training.
So did you have an idea of what specialty you wanted to get into then when you were 17?
Well, sure. Al, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be Special Forces. I'd heard but Special Forces was pretty new in those days. 1962, actually, it was created in 61. But they already had a reputation of being pretty tough guys, and I wanted to be one of them. And the recruiter gladly signed me up. Of course, I didn't realize at the time you can't sign up for Special Forces. You can volunteer for airborne school and others, and then you apply, and then you had to be
Yeah.
21 years old. So, I cooled my heels in the 82nd for 4 years until I hit that magic age of 21.
So you became a paratrooper then.
Yeah, I did. I went right to jump school after infantry training, and got into Fort Bragg in December of 1962.
So jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, that's a tough job.
Well, I don't know about that. You know, when you see so many of your buddies doing the same thing, you don't look at it as you're tough. You're just part of the group, and that's what makes people special, when they feel like they want to be involved and get involved in things like that makes you want to excel. And you know, we were told we were tough, so I guess we believed it. And that's part of being a warrior. You got to be tough to do tough things. Can't sugarcoat this stuff.
Nope, you sure can't. And it's all about individual merit and performance. But as you say, it's also an awful lot about bonding. I mean, that's such a critical element, especially as you know, and everybody that's been there. When a shooting starts, all those other things go right away, right?
Well, you know, I think there's a class of people or people with a certain character that want to do things for a greater cause. And I put the law enforcement, firefighters, and those in that same category. Military guys that
Yep.
join and men and women that join for that purpose, the true purpose of taking care of each other and the country and the republic. Um, we need those kind of people. Uh, it's hard to figure out. Um, well, we come from all walks of life, and we have all different cultures and religions, but there is this feeling that you have to be part of something great, that defend something you believe in, and that's the warrior class. And we've always
Yep.
had it. We always going to need it, and thank God that we have those willing to do the work.
So for your journey though through the military after the 82nd Airborne, where did you go then in Special Forces? I mean, you went through the training, I guess, right, for that. But where did you go after that?
Well, when I was at Fort Bragg, at 82nd Station there, and Smoke Bomb Hill is what we called Special Forces area compound on Fort Bragg. So I didn't
Hmm.
have to go far. But you know, when I applied, the idea was that you had to have a certain aptitude. Um, you had to have the physical qualifications, and you had to have be able to learn languages. And so, and then you had to have a clean record, no felonies and that sort of thing. So once I let me back up a little bit. In those days, a lot of people wanted to get into special forces, but they didn't take many.
Oh yeah.
And we never had a shortage of recruiting for special forces because there was always those that wanted to be a part of something special. And that's what this is all about is making people feel good about the what they're doing. And so when I went to just down the road from the 82nd Airborne Division to not more than a couple of miles to Smoke Bomb Hill, the world changed for me. Um, we got into. I started meeting the guys that were older, been around. A lot of them were prior service. They had to be in 21 years old. I was saying, and most of them, a lot of them were been in the Army 10 or 15 years. Rank was tough in those days in the Army, but Special Forces uh, was able to promote people to the level that their slot and the A team called for. And so that might have been a draw too. But boy, I just look back on it, and those guys I went through training with, they were the best. And we didn't lose many. By the time you got to
Yeah.
training, the old story about we test today 100, but only 3 wear the Green Beret, that's about right. Later, after I
Yep.
received the Medal of Honor, they weren't, I knew that to be the case because they weren't sure what to do with me for a while. And they put me in the worldwide recruiting for Special Forces. And I knew we went to Fort Carson. We talked to every soldier on Fort Carson, and we walked away with 3. And
That's
every
pretty
one of
good.
them, right? It was a fact. And, uh, you know, I remember the story when when I first got there, Bob Howard, who's also a Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam, quite a guy, just think the world of him. We went there, and of course the post commander and the post sergeant major were all upset that we were going to take their guys away from them, and we had the authority at that time to just hand somebody orders and call up the Mrs. Alexander in Washington, D.C., and they would go immediately to begin the selection for Special Forces. And I remember they were real upset, and I was sitting in that general's office, and the sergeant major, the general wasn't real talkative, but the sergeant major was, and he was upset. I said, Sergeant Major, don't worry, we're not going to take many of your people.
Yeah, all three of them, right?
We won't take many, and we took 3. So
yeah. Well, but as you say, it's that exclusivity, and it's not only that, but it is the challenge. It's the arduous nature of it. Sometimes the actual danger that does draw people out who have that commitment to it. But I think, as you say, it's a two-way street, right? It's the service wanting you to be good, but it's also about you being able to be fully committed to it, right?
absolutely, and I think the danger excites people. Uh, it's one of those things where be careful what you want, you ask for, because you get into it and you say, "Oh my, what am I doing here now?" But no, we the mission of Special Forces, even for a young guy like me, uh, was appealing because there was a lot going on in the Cold War all over the world. And Special Forces, that's what John F. Kennedy had in mind. It says, we're not going to go win wars for people. We're going to help them combat communism with advice and advisors and a little bit of equipment. Go in there and let them take care of business. Let them fight for their country to be force multipliers, so to speak, and not have American soldiers out there risking their lives, paying the sacrifice for some other country. Let some professionals, and that's what we called ourselves. That's our motto, the professionals, to go in there and take care of business. And in a lot of times, people back home didn't even know what it was we were doing until Vietnam
Yeah.
came along, and then everybody knew what we were doing there, pretty much.
So all of a sudden you found yourself in special forces now in Vietnam. And how did that go for you initially? Just getting there.
Well, so I got into Special Forces and it's now 1966, and the war in Vietnam was starting to get pretty hot and heavy. And I wanted to get into the action with, being on a Special Forces A team. That's what you live for, to get in there and
Yep.
organize, train, and equip and lead indigenous troops to fight the enemy. That's the mission. And the training was so good that we were motivated. We were competent, comfortable that we were competent in our ability to handle anything that came to us. And so in 1967, when I graduated from Special Forces training, I was ready to go. And I didn't get assigned to the 5th group in Vietnam right away. I went to the 6th group just down the road from training out in Fort Bragg. And I'm thinking, well, we're going to miss this war. Didn't realize that, like I said, you sometimes got to be careful what you ask for. But I was ready, and finally orders came that I was going to Vietnam, to the 5th Special Forces. And in those days, we weren't going as a team. We were going as replacements for casualties. They were, about that time, I think Special Force had lost about 750, somewhere in that neighborhood, which is a lot
Wow.
when you figure
Yeah.
The war had just started, and they've been involved in it since about '59. But anyway, I got over there and just went to Cameron Bay, and all the infantry guys going their way. Special Forces guys were met with Special Forces uh, NCOs from Nha Trang up the road there, and called their names out, and my name wasn't called, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? 2 days went by, and still hadn't called my name, and I'm really concerned now. I'm going to miss this war. And finally, they called my name and said, "You're going to Saigon." I'm thinking, Saigon? All the Special Forces guys go to Nha Trang up north. And so anyway, I got on the C-130 and flew down to Saigon. I'm thinking, what am I going to do in Saigon?
Yeah.
I hope they didn't realize that Special Forces was not Special Services, and I'd be handing out basketballs or something. I don't know. But when we landed at Cameron Bay, not Cameron, but Tan Son Nhut Air Base, um, they didn't unload anybody. We were just sitting there on a ramp, and this vehicle drove up, stuck his head in the crew compartment there, and said something I couldn't hear from the noise of the aircraft. And somebody came over and pointed to me and said, they want you. And I got out of the aircraft, and this guy introduced himself, and he said, I'm here to take you into Saigon, and you're going to be part of our program. He didn't know much about it. He was just a driver. But he said, I got to stop off and get you some civilian clothes. And I'm thinking, this doesn't sound good at all. And so I got some civilian clothes, and they took me to what they called the old embassy house, the old embassy, which was the headquarters for the CIA at the time, and said that I'll be working with the Central Intelligence Agency with the mission to organize, train, lead, and equip indigenous troops. That's our mission. So I'm starting to feel good about it. And I'm thinking, well, where's the rest of the team? And he says, it's a one-man team. And you're going to go down to your area, Chau Duc, and you're going to organize, train, equip, and lead mercenaries to eliminate the Vietcong infrastructure. That was my mission.
That's a pretty big task for one guy.
Yeah. And when you think about it, I was a staff sergeant at that time, and with the responsibility to go down there and to be the sole American that conducted operations on behalf of the United States and the Central Intelligence Agency. Was, in those days, working with the CIA was in itself was pretty much classified. Not like now, where people know that we have a relationship with the Title 50 branch of the government, and Title 10 guys get involved too with them. But in those days, it was a big secret. And to even now, when I talk about it, I just want to work CIA, because it was drilled in our head that we didn't talk about it. And so I got a couple of days of briefing, and it's all kind of cool. This is what I trained for. But I'm trying to figure out, I'm pretty much a new guy, only been in Special Forces a year, 24 years old. And why did I get asked to do this? Why did I get tasked? And no one really answered that question. But I guess maybe it was because I was young enough and dumb enough. I don't know. And one other thing is, I didn't know a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Being a new Special Forces guy, I didn't know a lot, so I could maybe get by under some kind of a cover as a civilian. So anyway, I didn't dwell on that too much, but I got my 2 days worth of briefings. It wasn't all that much, because they assumed I knew a lot. And I did. I was kind of cocky in those days. I knew that I could handle about anything. But then again, I didn't know what I was going to be getting into. And we made an intermediate stop at the regional headquarters, and the regional officer in charge, Jim Ward was his name, a 50-something-year-old guy, about 50, I guess, and really impressive. And found out he was in OSS at the beginning, which was the predecessor of CIA and Special Forces.
Yeah.
And parachuted into Burma to organize the Kachins to operate against the Japanese. So he had my attention. So after I guess I was there about a day, and I went there one night, and he was very much a gentleman, just very, very sophisticated, but you knew he meant business. And so after we had a couple of drinks that evening, and I said, well, Mr. Ward, he said, you call me Jim. I said, okay, Jim, how am I going to know if I'm doing a good enough job? That's, as a young soldier, you want to be successful and you want to know you're doing right. He said, Drew, your job is to capture the enemy. If you're not capturing them, you're going to know it. That's pretty blunt. And I said, well, what are the rules? He said, there are no rules. You capture the enemy.
Huh?
I don't even know. I never heard of the term at that time.
Yeah.
And he said, what I thought was pretty cool, because our own individual character and our morals were what was guiding us. And we went after the enemy. And so I flew into Chau Duc, Vietnam. Air America was the civilian airline flying people all over the country. But
yeah, we used to fly them. We used to fly them in the Air Force too. We called them Scare America.
Yeah, and it's a pretty neat deal. They were the airline flying Vietnamese and everybody around the country, but it was also a way to get their operatives out to wherever they need to be. And so I went on down to Chau Duc, and there was a guy this Pilatus Porter. I'm waiting for somebody to tell me what to do, right? And the first thing he said, got into this Pilatus Porter. He said, is this in Vietnam or Cambodia? And I said, well, you tell me, He said, well, I got this map here, and it's right on the border, but the words Chau Duc are in Cambodia. I said, well, I think it's in Vietnam. But so anyway, here I am waiting for people to tell me what to do, and everybody's asking me questions. And so I acted like I knew what I was doing. And so we've headed that way, and he got up pretty high up, about over 5,000 feet or something. He says, well, last time I was down here, I got shot at pretty good. So I'm going to stay up here at 5,000 feet. But as I get into your area, I'm going to drop down so you can get a look at the layout of the countryside. So that's pretty smart. And I'm looking down as we were dropping down to lower altitude, and I'm seeing nothing but rice fields and a few trees along the banks of the river. I said, there's no enemy down here. How can they hide? And little did I know they can hide anywhere, and there's a lot of enemy down there. And he said, well, I'm not sure where to land. There's no airfield right now. We usually land on the rice paddies when the dry season comes. We can land anywhere. So I'm thinking, what's he asking me for information or decision on where to land? And he said, well, I'm going to land on this piece of road out there and just south of town. And it was where they had just bombed out a crater in the road. It wasn't but 300 or 400 feet of straight roadway and no way to turn around and water on both sides. And I'm thinking, how in the heck? I knew a little bit about flying. How in the heck is he going to take off if he can stop? And sure enough, he hovered that thing, dropped it down. I got out, he waved at me, and he just kept going and just took off the same direction. And there was an American there that met me, and he says, welcome, glad you're here. We're gonna take you to the embassy house. And there were 3 Americans I was one of 3 at the embassy house. And my project, we had individual projects, and mine was the Provincial Reconnaissance Unit, which was an innocuous title for the mission that we had. And so that's where I started my tour.
So almost by yourself, though, still.
Well, we had someone that ran the embassy house. I found out later he was a lieutenant colonel in the Army that had been detailed to the CIA to run the logistics, and also he was advisor to the police. And then there was Jim Moore, who was the advisor to the Census Grievance Program and also the Revolutionary Development Program, separate from mine. But he actually ran the CIA operations. It was back and forth intriguing. Westy, the lieutenant colonel, was an older guy. You would think he'd be running it. The one that actually was kind of incognito as far as running it, but he was actually running it as far as the outfit goes. And then when I showed up, they said, well, you got the PRU and let me know what you need. It's kind of the way it went.
So did you have any support from the local forces, the ARVN or the Cambodians?
No support. Actually, the reason why there was the cover of the CIA and that I was actually considered a civilian is because a staff sergeant wouldn't get along too well with the Vietnamese officers or even American officers if there happened to be any in the area. Yeah. So, but the thing that's significant was we were to eliminate the enemy infrastructure, regardless where they were. And some of them had infiltrated into the ARVN, the Vietnamese military. So we didn't develop that relationship because we had to be separate, stand away, so go wherever the information took us to get to the Vietcong. And they had some Vietcong active members in the military, and so certainly a few sympathizers.
Yeah, I know that was a big deal.
Yeah, and the one good thing that whoever thought this program out did a pretty good job. They made the men that we recruited draft exempt from the Vietnamese military. So they had no obligation to us. Now, a lot of the guys, I had a few already, and I recruited some more. They were former VC, some were criminals. I had a pretty lively bunch of guys that were looking for a sanctuary of sorts. And that's how I got my folks. And turned out pretty good. When you got to hunt bad people, you got to use bad people sometimes, and that's the way it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So how many did you have under your control then?
The most I had was I think was 137, and when you look back on it, we didn't develop them with the promise that we're going to make them like us. Yeah, that's a big mistake that we do in this country. We go somewhere, we get our allies, and we try to make them like us, dress them like us, the same weapons, equipment. We used all World War II or foreign weapons. There were no M16s, no U.S. weapons except those from World War II, considered sterile at the time. But you know, what we did and what became so effective is we gave them the kind of the autonomy to operate in their environment, but we had protected them with this status of draft exempt or whatever. But it also allowed us to create our little warrior class of people there that were actually very respected and feared by the locals. You need a little of that. You can't go in there and be nice to everybody. I mean, we weren't brutal and all that. We just were quiet and matter of fact and did our business, and they didn't mess with us. And that's how we got along because we were vastly outnumbered. When you figure 137 at the max, counting me, in a province that size with 5 districts, and there was already 3 operational VC battalions in the area, and no American units except one special forces team and advisory. It was a special forces camp that was down in the mountains, and another one that had just turned over to the MACV, which is turned over to the Arvins. So we were the main force there. And I'm thinking, 137 is enough. We're not in the business to get into a firefight, and we didn't have any defensive weapons anyway. So I dispersed my group out into 5 18-man teams and put them in the 5 districts in areas where as much as I could, where they came from. So they knew the people, and which turned out to be pretty darn good source of information because if you sit in the center and never go anywhere, you're not going to find out anything. But when I dispersed them out, information started coming back. Mm-hmm. And in no time, we started capturing the enemy. We became a real pain in the ass to the VC.
Yeah, no kidding, but undermanned. So did you feel that your troops were then motivated well enough to be able to get into combat and be reliable so you could depend on them?
Here's the thing. You're dealing with mercenaries, basically. So their motives are either for protection, money, prestige, whatever drives them to do this.
Yeah, a little different than yours.
Yes. And then, but what we had to watch for was and it worked in our favor, once we became successful in these small 18-man team in their pocket, they had to really stick together or they'd be wiped out in no time. Mm. And I had, with the 5 18-man teams, and I had a reactionary team that is something we didn't plan on. We had to plan on it, but we didn't count on. And that is to react, to go and help one of those 18-man teams if they were attacked. But we didn't build compounds everywhere. We lived in the villages, or they did. I did build a compound in one district because it was so far out and right next to the Cambodian border that I had to make a defensive position and had up to 30 guys there, and we were in constant attack. But it turned out to be a pretty good move because whenever you create a target, you don't just sit there and wait. Sure, you got a target, but you also have people on the edges that can start snatching people that are reconning your area or moving in to attack you. We got quite a few enemy from that An Phu area. But going back to it, the interesting part of working with mercenaries is you bridge the gap. All right, you've convinced them they're tough. I gave them a lot of respect, but I demanded it myself. But we played a few games with them. It's all a mind game. We had 3 ethnic groups up there. We had Vietnamese, Cambodians, and some Chinese. And you would tell the Vietnamese in private, got to watch those Cambodians. They got a problem. You tell the Cambodians, the Vietnamese,
Yeah.
you got to watch them. You don't trust them. And by doing that, I was able to get information on somebody that might be thinking of either making a hit on me, or turning somebody in, or that's a problem when you're dealing with former VC or criminals, and that worked. But then, I could never let my guard down. But when I was out with them, I got to where I was really feeling good about being around them, and I didn't speak their language. I mean, I knew a few words. They didn't speak English. Interpreters that I tried to get were kind of spineless and didn't really want to be out there. Maybe they were too smart. Didn't want to be out there under this high risk
Get shot
environment.
at it.
But anyway, a couple of the Chinese guys could speak a little bit of English, and in the military way, I just finished, because in Special Force you have to have a language, and I just finished Spanish language, and they sent me there. And so I had Cambodians, Vietnamese, and Chinese that I had to communicate with. We spent more time in Special Forces in those days. You had to be language capable. The goal is to teach Special Forces people to speak the language, but more importantly, how to communicate as a soldier to each other, or to know when an interpreter is not interpreting. You got to use tricks in order to, because they'll take over. The interpreter will, in a bad environment, will tell them to go this way, and you wonder, why are they going that way? Well, that's because the enemy's over here. They wanted to get out of the way, the interpreter. So I signed off gave up using those interpreters, and that someone tried to provide for me, and used one of my Chinese guys. And from then on, they respected him. I knew he would never be afraid of going into the VC, because the more we were close to the VC, the more we were able to get into their backyard and pick them off, the better they felt about their job. And of course, they got paid bonus when they captured somebody, and they liked the money too. I mean, they got $30 a month as their pay. Chinese got 100. It was a lot of money in those days. And
Yeah.
But we didn't ruin them.
Well,
we didn't give them.
so
We didn't promise them a lot of stuff.
but you ended up having to depend on them, which I guess probably was helpful if you were only kind of there by yourself as one of the lone Americans. So tell our viewers though a little bit about how that translated then into your battle when you got your Medal of Honor. How did that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting piece of the history here. Is, first of all, hold on, we got to.
Yeah.
We can stop here. Cindy will
Okay.
make it right.
What we got?
Looks like you ran out of
Battery
battery
problem
or
or
something.
I guess, I don't know.
I can edit it out.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll patch it in okay. Well, Drew, your discussion about using mercenaries and foreign actors is interesting. I think we had a little different view of that in the Air Force because we were in a little different environment. But it's good to know that.
Well, I look back on when I was in, we figured everybody did their job and we counted on
Yep.
everybody, whether the Navy on the rivers or the Air Force. And of course, in that unit I was in, I didn't get any support. There was zero support.
Yeah,
We didn't.
That's what's amazing.
There was none. I didn't even carry a radio because there was nobody to call, and I felt comfortable that way because we only went out with 5 or 6 guys and sometimes 8 or 10. But once we got bigger like that, then we're more vulnerable. 5 or 6 guys can look out for each other and blend in really nice.
Yeah, and they don't make as much noise going through the jungle and playing along with stuff.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that and your major conflict. But then I think then I want to kind of get in and talk a little bit more about what we talked about earlier, which was the preservation of the warrior ethos now. What's the problem? How are we going to handle it? And go back over a little bit about meritocracy and standards. One of the things that bothers me, by the way, is standards, because we seem to be abandoning them now. And when we do that, as you know, then you start losing your lethality and whatever actual performance value you have if you can't measure it, if you can't train to it.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that a little bit. But
you want me to finish up to the question that you just asked about the battle and what led up to that?
yes, if we can, Drew, and we'll do that. So we're at about the halfway point here, a little bit more than that right now.
Okay. Well, you're going to edit. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, we're pretty good at editing, and Cindy's real good about taking the times out when I'm scratching my nose or something,
Yeah.
So anyway, so looks like you got your battery back here, so we'll just pick up from there, okay?
Yeah, it's interesting how the development where the action was for the Medal of Honor is, and when you think about our mission was to know what's going on in our area, and if those listeners that understand what a little bit of history about the Chinese New Year and the Tet Offensive of '68, there was this push by both sides to have a ceasefire for the holidays. I mean, they'd had them over the years before, I guess, and there was one looming there. And I came back off of patrol, and I think there's nothing out there, and we're usually always able to run into something across the Cambodian border or whatever, some enemy soldiers and nothing. I came back and I was talking to Jim Moore and I said, Jim, I don't know. There's something going on here. Tet's coming to the Tet and the ceasefire's coming in a day or so. And anyway, whatever. And he said, well, there were some Navy SEALs that just showed up. I heard you had some action up here, and they didn't have a lot of action because they were not into didn't have areas so much, just along the rivers and things like that. And they'd heard we got a little action. They were wanting some. And I said, sure, we'll take them in. I'll get a couple hours sleep and go up towards the Cambodian border and just take another look. And so we did, and we unloaded. And the PBRs, they come. The Navy SEALs come with all kinds of stuff. They had river boats and everything. So shoot, rather
Oh
than
yeah.
a sampan or whatever, we got in those river boats and went up to above An Phu, and they dropped us off. We started heading towards this Cambodian outpost. I knew where it was, and we got a little bit of fire, but not a lot. And I'm thinking, well, if we get into something, we're going to need to get some support, because I have the Navy SEALs with me and not just 4 or 5 of my guys. And so we were going to get some Vietnamese artillery kind of lined up, and there was no getting through to the Vietnamese unit at An Phu. And one of the SEALs had a radio and said, "Hey, there's something going on in Chau Duc," and we realized right away why we didn't have any comms with An Phu is there was a major attack. And so the first thing we needed to do was get back to Chau Duc and see what was going on. And I was talking to Jim on the radio through one of the patrol boats. And he was saying that VC have overrun the city, and he mentioned the nurse Maggie was probably killed because she was in the middle of where the action was and all that. And so we headed back, and basically what it was is we got into this, went into the town from the river, landed there on the beach, fought our way to the Vietnamese headquarters, and they were totally demoralized, given up. And we needed to find out what was going on. So I linked up with Jim Moore, and we went and got Maggie out. And I'm just kind of go over some of this stuff, but to get the idea, I don't want to dwell on the action too much because it took 56 hours. So where do you start and end? But it was a pretty big battle, and we were able to rescue a lot of the American civilians that were volunteers that had been captured by the Vietcong. And in doing so, one of the SEALs was killed, and that resulted in the SEALs leaving the city to evacuate him. He hadn't died yet, but they didn't come back. And as a result, we were able to systematically go through with about, somewhere around, got up to 20 people at one time, because we're talking about a holiday where everybody was off downtown celebrating or whatever, and we're talking about a major battle with half a dozen of my guys and a couple of VC battalions. But we had some good luck in that they kept moving along, and then off-duty guys that had belonged to the PRU jumped in behind us, and we got up to 20 people, and we had some momentum, and we captured the leader of that operation. He was equivalent to a general officer. Captured him, and then things started going our way really fast. And so basically that's what it was. We captured that general officer and 18 other prisoners, rescued the civilians, and killed a bunch of the enemy, and they decided they better leave. And you wonder, how did such a small group become so effective against a larger force? And all I can say is we didn't have anything to defend. We were just moving and eliminate the enemy in front of us. And the only time we thought about where we had been is when I had somebody wounded. I had to leave them there, and they fought on a street corner or somewhere to keep the enemy from coming around us. But a lot of combat is just having the good guys to be with, having the desire to move in there, take care of business, and a lot of luck. You got to have some luck, and they have to have some bad luck. It's the way it works.
Yeah. And it's a lot of innovation, dealing with unknowns and things you hadn't expected. And that's where that training and that discipline comes in, right? and being good at
Well,
what you do.
well, that's true, and I knew the town a little bit, and when you eliminate their commanders and they're not set
Yeah.
up to have a chain of command like the military has been in the past, some ways
Hmm.
always jumping in there. Most of the medals of honor over in World War II and Korea were, and in Vietnam, in conventional units, were those that had replaced their company commander, platoon leader, whatever. And if you read a lot of the citations, that's what the bad situation, and they took it over and they moved ahead. And
Yeah.
American soldiers are willing to do that, unlike a lot of others, because they're afraid to make mistakes. And I'm afraid we may be going down that path a little bit where we're taking the ability for someone to take charge, to fill in the void that's created, and because you all know what the mission is, and not be micromanaged to the point where you're afraid to make a decision. And I'm afraid we're getting that way a little bit.
So the micromanaging and large and bureaucratic leadership functions get in the way of both the efficiency as well as your ability to develop new things on the spot and take care of problems, right? Problem solve.
Yeah, I mean, the ingenuity of American soldiers, and I mean, you hear stories about this. What was this farmer that created this plow kind of thing to knock the forest trees down in the hedgerows? I mean, in World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, remarkable stories like that. And when we had draftees, I later had another tour in Vietnam as a company commander after I got a battlefield commission in the 101st. And the most ingenious guys were those that came off of farms or stuff, that knew how to do things, and they're all 18 years old. I mean, where do you learn that when you're 18? Except if you work ethics from being a young guy and growing up. If you say being 18 is growing up, but growing up to take care of business like war fighting. But the thing that bothers me a lot is, and I've been thinking about it lately, is we're losing the focus of the mission. And the mission in the military is the clearest mission of any job you can have, and that's to
Yeah.
protect the United States, kill the enemy before they kill you. Everything else is off the table. That's the job. And we can't get into the business of doing other things that take away from that mission. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, we had a draft in those days. And I said before, we didn't have a shortage of special forces guys. People wanting to join. And now we got recruiting problems. And people say, well, I don't know why. We don't know. What is it? Well, it's because we're losing the identity of what makes people want to be warriors. Even people that don't have that, the experience, they just want to be something. They want to be something important and do important work. And I'll tell you, war fighting is important work when the cause is just. It really is.
So today, because of that, and we're starting to see the reductions in recruiting, retention has fallen off, and you've got problems with people, just wanting to be involved, as you say. We used to create that in families like yours and mine, where we had generations of people who were in the military. They understood a lot of it, if not all of it, but they had the commitment and the willpower to want to serve and to do the things that we're talking about in being a warrior. Today, we're seeing less of that. There's a lot of entitlement, and everything has to be instant gratification. And one of my tenets has always been, if you're happy, you probably are getting too easy of a break here. We worked people night and day during Vietnam, and the guys that complain and gripe about it as soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marines are want to do. But I realized after a while they were the happiest when they were involved, and it was arduous, it was difficult, and they took great pride in the fact that they could do that. And I think you're right. That's kind of what may be starting to be missing here. So that brings us to the question, Drew. How do we change that? We don't have to fight it because we can do it easily in the military when we want to, but how do we get back to that, those values?
Well, I've thought of that, and we're losing the cultural values, but we haven't lost it. I mean, it's getting diluted a little bit. The military is one of these organizations that can change it really quick.
Yes.
I mean, we used to see, if you recall, I'm not going to talk about the Navy or the Air Force or whatever, because I don't know much about them other than they're great services and they do wonderful work. But I'm going to focus on the Army because I saw recruiting posters that showed guys jumping out of airplanes, swimming under the water, doing stuff, rappelling, being tough. And let's face it, you get the guy in high school that wants an identity. That's an identity they can take. I want to be that person. And I hope that I'm wrong. But I hope that the first person in official briefing they don't get in the military is how to be kind to everybody, how to understand everybody's soft points. If you get what I'm leading to.
I do indeed.
I'll never forget that sergeant that stood up there in front of us at basic training and said, "You guys, I don't know whether you come from the farm or you're rich kids or what, but you're going to be the same when I get out of here. You're going to eat the same food. You're going to sleep when I tell you to sleep, all these things." And I don't know, but we all looked at that and says, "Whoa, this is what it's going to take." He said, "You're going to do this because if we have to go to war, I want to know that you're going to defend me and my friends and my family." I've never forgotten that. I hope that the first briefing they don't get now is some DEI briefing that says, if you got any problems, come and see the whatever. He's wearing some kind of a deal that says he's an expert in DEI. What does that tell somebody that just signed up to have the toughest job in the United States military or in the United States when the time comes?
Yeah.
What does that tell that person?
Well, I think that's what's wrong now when they're talking about trying to get recruiting solved and retention. It's like, okay, what are we going to do for these folks? Let's give them something. Let's give them a Starbucks in the barracks. Let's give them more money. Let's give them more time off. Let's stop enforcing the standards that are tough on them, like physical fitness and actual combat training that is training people to train the way they're going to fight. If we're going to back off on any of that, especially the standards, then you're going to start getting a force that's not very competent and has troubles doing it. And I see that where I live here in Central Texas, one of America's military towns, San Antonio. You go onto bases and you see a lot of people who you wonder why they're there. They're first of all, there's a lot of them are overweight. They're out of shape. They're wearing all kinds of odd things that we didn't used to have to do. And it looks like they just got up out of bed and came to work. Look, it's not hard, as you say, to make a change that is done quickly if you just have some good standards, things that make sense, and things that are focused again on the performance that people are going to have to do.
Well, I don't know. I was working. I'm one of these guys that worked. Maybe I haven't quit yet, but just up a few years ago, I was doing some training at Fort Bragg, provided training for special forces in the tradescraft department, the basic skills. And I noticed at Fort Bragg, when I was there before, rush hour at the gate, well, there wasn't a gate then, it's been 9/11, but the rush hour was 6 o'clock, 5 to 6 o'clock. With all these troops living off post, coming to work. Now, rush hour is 8. And you don't see troops doing PT because they say we're going to let them do it on their own. So my collection of cadre that I had, we were downtown in Fayetteville, we'd go have breakfast at 7 or 8 o'clock. And in that Waffle House or the Denny's was all these soldiers wearing nice, clean PT uniforms, eating. They weren't doing PT.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I'm not. It was remarkable. And you don't know whether they are eating because they just finished it or they're eating before they go run. I don't know, but my guess is that neither one of them. But they'd be wearing that, and the rush hour was between 8 and 9. And that says a lot right there. We're trying to make soldiers comfortable.
Yep.
And soldiering is never going to be comfortable in the battlefield. Never.
Yep.
When I think of that rifle company I had in the jungles, Vietnam, where we'd go out for 90 days, come back for 2 or 3 to get refitted or whatever, and then back for 90 days. Now, 90 days meant in the jungle living off a rucksack. And those guys could handle it. They did a wonderful job. All of them about 18 years old, some of them 19.
Yeah.
And not many sergeants. We had sergeants, they were called shake and bakes. They made them sergeants after basic training or individual training. And I'm thinking that's why we take care of troops the best we can in the battlefield, but not make them comfortable in training. I just don't get it. We don't want to go back to the way it was because I'm an old guy and this is the way it was and everybody should experience it. No, we understand, like you do, that war fighting is serious business.
Yeah,
and the best way to survive and win the war is to make the people tough. And almost everything that I read about the military, and I read not just one side of the news, but I read all of it, is what they're doing to make soldiers feel more comfortable.
Yep.
Let them pick the pattern of camouflage paternity wear. And we all know if they're pregnant, they're not going to be fighting anyway.
Exactly.
This is just something I read. And I said, what is it? And how expensive is that? I'd rather see soldiers get ammunition and training, and not because staff officers, we got a lot of them now. We got more than probably ever before in ratio, colonels and generals, sit around and figure out what to do to make life better for soldiers, and most of them have never been in combat. You cannot lose sight of what the mission of a soldier is. That's to kill the enemy before they kill you, period.
And that's something that rests pretty deeply in people, I think. And some people get it. A lot of others certainly don't. But I think you can be trained into doing a lot of the things that you're talking about. It just takes the courage and the willpower on those who are leaders to be able to do that. And sometimes that's kind of missing. Here's a quick story because you mentioned the 101st Airborne earlier. Back on right before D-Day in the 101st, they were packing up, getting ready to go. There were two riggers that were packing chutes who weren't probably going to go because they were kind of new guys. They were qualified jumpers, but they weren't senior enough. So as they're loading up the C-47s to take off and go over to fly over the beaches in Omaha and Normandy, these two guys decide they're going to go along anyway. So they suited up, got everything else to gear, and they went and snuck on the airplane. They were stowaways on a C-47, took off, and halfway there, the chaplain who was on board realized, hey, these are not guys that should be here. He talked to them and they said, yes, sir, but we weren't going to be left out. We wanted to come. And he says, all right, you stay with me because you're going to be in some trouble when we get back. So they parachuted in, landed near St. Mary Glee and the hedgerows and had to fight their way through that town. But these two guys ended up being real heroes in their own right. Both of them ended up with silver stars and purple hearts out of it. But when they got back, they were going to be court-martialed, except the chaplain stood up and said, sir, to the general, these are guys who came along not because they had to, but because they thought it was their duty and needed to. And both of them got promoted to sergeant, and that was the end of that story. And no one knows who they are, except one of them I know because it was my father-in-law.
Well, that's the thing that a warrior, if you're in the warrior class, you want to do things that others, that are doing it, and you don't want anybody doing it for you. You want to be a part of it. I don't know if they were brave when they did. They just felt like they had to do it. The bravery comes after you're in it.
Well, it was also that feeling of being a part of the band of brothers that everybody else is doing it. And you have a responsibility, if not an obligation, to be a part of that if you can. And in that case, it was probably just, something that they decided to do on their own. I mean, it was a pretty interesting event. But that's maybe where we need to get back to.
You think about it after Vietnam, the welcome that the Vietnam veterans didn't get. Okay, I'm in Special Forces. I didn't care. I didn't need a welcome, right? But I lost a lot of sleep over how those young draftees were treated when they come home. Get rid of your uniforms, put on civilian clothes, forget it never happened. How can you forget that? First of all, they were proud of their service. And if we tell them they shouldn't be, we've taken that away from them, which we don't have a right to do after we tell them that they should do it. But how many times have you heard about imposters of people that were wanted to be part of Vietnam but never went? I mean, there's more that wanted to be in Vietnam than ever served, probably.
Absolutely. So yes. I know what you're talking about.
That's what we need to get our recruiting back on track. Give these guys identity and these women that want to be in there if they can do the job, but not recruit them under one pretense and then try to make them warm and fuzzy where they lose their identity and inundate them with classes on maybe you got to understand somebody because they want to be another gender or something. That's somebody else's job to do that if they want to do that in this country. Not in the military.
Yep.
It ought to be hands off in our intelligence services and our Department of Defense, period. And there's already laws about discrimination. If somebody wants to join, fine. That doesn't mean that you have an obligation, a right to serve. No, serving is you have to make the grade to be a part of the warrior class. Yep. You can't just say, oh, I want to be a warrior, and put on your makeup and go do your thing. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, this war fighting has been the same from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And we can't make it sterile, and we can't just make it give everybody a chance. And they're not a warrior and don't want to be one. They just want to be something. Who knows what they want to be? They don't even know yet. But that sergeant that told me, I'm going to make you all the same, so I know that you're going to be able to defend me and my friends and my family. I've never forgotten that, and we shouldn't. That's what the dialogue ought to be when they first get the basic training.
Yeah, and nor have I forgotten that either, Drew. So that brings us kind of to the point where you are now, and you're sitting in a beautiful center in Pueblo, Colorado, the Center for American Values. That's the same thing we've been talking about here with the military too. It's American values, and are we on track to keep those? And if not, what are we going to do about it? You're blessed to be living where you are and doing that. Tell us a little bit about your efforts.
Well, first of all, when I received the Medal of Honor many, many years ago, more than 50 years ago, sure, I got recognition, but you can't just live on what you've done in the past. 50 years ago, can you imagine? If I would
Yeah, I
have just lived
do.
on that, what I'd be doing? Nothing. But I felt with co-founder of the center, Brad Padula, we've created this remarkable, as you can maybe see it here, and the portraits of these Medal of Honor recipients, 166 now. I knew every single one of them. And they are all different people, but they share one thing, and that's a strong bond that's connected by this thin ribbon. They're all different. And there's not a one of them I knew that wouldn't, they've already proven they're willing to give their life, but would continue to do it. And I feel obligated for the good fortune that I've had to be recognized by receiving this medal, to put it to good use and let young people know that when times are tough and you believe in what you're doing, you make right choices and you can do some good. Now, we also tell them that you don't have to be in the Army, military, or have a Medal of Honor to do good things in this country. Well, our founders were warriors, but they didn't carry a gun. You can fight for what you believe in, and you will be a better person for it. And so that's why this center is so important. And it's getting some serious legs now because people need an identity. We're getting fuzzed up here on who we are as an individual. And when young people come into the gallery here, we don't tell them what to think. We just tell them that they can think and how to think. That if they hesitate in making a decision, a split decision, more than a minute or two, they're considering a wrong option here. Like every one of these folks on the wall made a decision on the battlefield, it was the right decision. They saved lives and they got recognized for it. You don't do it for recognition, but when you do good things, you will be recognized. And you'll feel good about it. You'll make your community proud, your family proud. And let's face it, that's what the warrior class is, to be proud of what you're doing. And if we get back to that, we will not have a recruiting problem, period.
Yes. Yeah, we got to get away from trying to give people stuff so they'll be attracted to it. We need to let them experience it and realize how great it actually is.
I even heard
thank you
story.
so.
I just wanted to say, I heard, like, giving him stuff. I heard a story. I don't know if to be true or not. But it came from a credible source that they're proposing to give soldiers extra money if it got certain temperature, cold. And thinking, I was an XO of an infantry battalion in Fort Wainwright, Alaska. Those guys were proud of the fact that nobody could handle that. Well, we talk about we take care of troops. Everybody knows that. That's the ethos. Every officer and non-commissioned officer takes care of troops. You take care of them by looking out for their basic needs, but don't take away from them the desire to be tough. But when I had that was XO of that infantry battalion in Alaska, and I had a good fortune of running the battalion quite a bit because the battalion commander was gone quite a bit. And those guys up there were the toughest and took great pride into operating at 40, 50 below zero.
Yeah.
Nobody could hold a candle against them. Now, the notion of paying somebody extra money when it hit 20 below, that's the wrong reason. I mean, let's face it, fighting in the cold is one of the toughest environments that you can be in. Especially, can you imagine treating wounded and everything when it's 40, 50 below zero?
Yeah. That's
Like they
tough
were in
environment.
Korea. It's just amazing to even comprehend that. And I did a lot of work in the cold. I like the winter. It's just kind of in me, but I lived in Alaska for many years. But to want to pay somebody a bonus, I don't know if this is true. I hope it's not. And then to say that, they said, well, you don't believe you want to give troops what they deserve? There's a difference there. What we need to do is give them the training, make them feel good. They'll be prancing around in off duty and stuff like in the old days and be proud of wearing the uniform. Now they look kind of carefree, like they deserve it. We haven't been in a war in quite a while. Sure, there's folks out there getting shot at once in a while, and there's special forces guys and gals doing stuff somewhere, but not everybody. So let's train. Let's train hard, because you're gonna if you got to be able to train like you're going to fight, because if you don't train, everybody says, oh, I would do it different if we were in a real war, bull. If you're going to train like you're going to fight,
Yes.
because you're going to fight like. I absolutely believe that we won the war. The politicians just didn't give us the victory, and I don't know how many I get phone calls every now and then from one of my soldiers from the rifle company I had, and they're troubled, as they get older. They wonder what's going on, and they should be proud of what they've done. And being in war is the most significant thing, and it will change you, because if it doesn't change you, life changes people, but war is pretty significant, and we need to make it change them for the better, and you do that by appreciating the service. Period.
Well, and the guys that I fought with are that way too. We're still as tight as brothers and sisters, literally, and it's something that just never goes away. Even though you might want it to go away at times, it just won't. And so, but on the other hand, it's one of those life experiences which makes you what you are as you go along in life. And I can look back and see people who did amazing things that I never probably would have expected, actually, when I first got to know them when they were in high school or something. It's a pretty phenomenal thing to see happen. And I've seen young sailors, young airmen turned around who I thought weren't going to make it and were going to be out in a couple of days, and end up being just great warriors themselves. But it's the training, it's the discipline, it's the leadership, it's the intensity of what you're doing, which does make people stick around.
Well, that rifle company, when I mentioned that the average age was just under 19.
Yeah.
And I was 28. I'm an old man now when I went back over. That factored
Yeah.
my age in there. But what does it take we're obligated to take high school kids. We're drafting them. We're obligated
Hmm.
to take care of them, not by making them feel good, but we need to make them tough.
Yep.
And not one of them that I know of didn't come out bad because of what they went through. Only if they're now, well, like when we brought them back from Vietnam, we were told to don't wear your uniforms and all that. That's the
Yeah.
problem. It wasn't the war fighting. Everybody understands that pretty fast. You have to have compassion of everybody's ability. You have compassion and respect for your enemy. If you don't, you're not going to lose. But those guys, I put them up against anybody. They didn't know anything, but they stuck it out with each other. And I can think back of what it was like in their minds. Because I'm a career soldier. I'm 28. I'm an old guy, been through a few firefights. These young guys, when they found out that I'm their company commander, greatest leadership challenge I ever had is I took over a rifle company in the jungle and went in by helicopter, and there were Stars and Stripes newspapers being thrown off, and on the headlines is Medal of Honor recipient commands rifle company in Vietnam. Those young guys, I didn't realize it right away what that probably meant. That, oh man, he's going to get us all killed because of, wants another Medal of Honor or something. But after a while, they realized, no, aggressive patrolling and we didn't do defensive positions at night.
Yeah.
We took ambushes.
Yeah.
And
On the offense.
we got on the enemy. And we didn't lose very many guys. I hate to say that. If you lose one, that's too many. But we brought most of them back. And I don't have regrets about how I operated over there one bit. And I hope that, and I pray that they all lived their life knowing that they had some pride into what they did.
Well, and I think they do. And it's through stories and things like what we're trying to do, Drew, that tells why people do it, and maybe gives a little bit of inspiration to the younger crowd today to want to take a look at being a part of that. That's my hope, and I know that you feel the same way too.
Oh, I
Listen.
think the younger crowd does want to be a part of it. The problem is when they get into the military, it's like they're hit right between the eyes. Whoa, what am I getting into? I've heard it so many times where somebody joins the military because of their father, their uncle, or their brothers, or whatever, and they come in and they find out, whoa, all they're more interested in is somebody's special interests. The only special interest there is keeping them alive on the battlefield and killing the enemy before they kill you. If we never have to go to war, absolutely, I'll clap my hands to that. But
yeah, me too.
By being tough, it might keep us out of a war too.
Well, that's the whole idea here is anybody like us that's been to war doesn't want to be one of the guys to have to go fight one again or have our children or grandchildren have to do it. But it is peace through deterrence and the knowledge that the other side knows that we are lethal, that we are able and well trained, and then through meritocracy and performance, we can be dependent on to do those things. The bad guys know that, and especially places like China, except when you get the political element involved in it, that can change that entirely. And we've seen that. We saw that in Vietnam, and sadly, we saw it again in Afghanistan. When we don't stay consistent in the way that we conduct ourselves as warriors, then it all starts to evaporate.
Well, I think we fight these long wars, and we get um, we almost we give the enemy time to meet an escalation, right? These long
Yep.
wars. Uh, what we have is overwhelming power to go in and and eliminate a threat. We've taken that away by giving parity on the battlefield,
Yep.
and it doesn't work. It just won't work.
Well,
Uh,
one of the worst things that I saw was in Vietnam was when we started having stand downs, bombing halts and stuff, stopping the war for a while so that the enemy could come to the table and reason with us and maybe not want to fight us. That's a philosophy that doesn't work very well at all.
doesn't
And it wasn't until the very end of the war when we decided that we were going to stop it finally and did it in a very big way, and it worked.
Well, I think you and I and so many other people know what we really need to do. It's just not, we're too comfortable in making our case.
Yeah.
Uh, because let's face it, we'll never, hopefully, the vast majority of the population would not have to be in a war. We just have to have a small group of people, men and women, that are going to be willing to make that sacrifice, that want to do it. Let's give
Mm-hmm.
them the training and the leadership to do it. And I had the good fortune of being an aide to Hank Emerson, the gunfighter.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people on our listeners would probably know the name. And he was a wild man. And that's how I got back to Vietnam, because he helped me get back. They didn't want me to go.
I think we kind of froze up again here.
And he had two DSCs, one from Korea and one Vietnam. Now, in the 60s, in the 70s, after the war, we had racial issues in the United States Army, military, pretty
Yep.
serious. Was a corps commander, which was about 100, Fort Campbell, Fort Bragg, and I believe Fort Lewis at the time, 109,000 troops. He had a program called Pro-Life. Didn't take away from the warfighting capabilities or the mission. And he said that, and I'll never forget this, he said, you are going to learn about each other's culture. We're not telling you to make them special. You're just going to understand culture, and you're going to do it through music. And he created this weekend gathering where they had singers, famous singers, well-known singers from every culture, soul music, country, all of it. And he said, you're going to listen to it all weekend long on the parade field. And that's where I met Charlie Pride and Loretta Lynn, Conway Twitty, because they came. No, that it's froze up, but when it was over, guys were arm in arm. Morning came, they were arm in arm, understanding each other better. And he hired a colonel by the name of Colin to spearhead that, and I got to know pretty well. So it takes audacity, it takes the willingness to understand the mission and soldiers, and he was a warrior. That's why he got the nickname Gunfighter. I mean, he got out of that helicopter, landed there shooting his 45 off, and killed a lot of enemies, saved them until he got shot down again. But he was a real man, and we need to do more like him. general officers need to look out. So I think it's time to go. This is
We're starting to get hung up here somehow, I guess, with the airwaves. Drew, listen, thank you, sir, for being a part of us today. We are honored to have you with us as not just a guest on the podcast Stars and Stripes, but also as a advisory board member in Stars. And I hope we'll see you back again another day, along with you out there in the audience. We want you to come back and listen to more of the stories that we'll tell about how we're going to keep our military fighting, lethal, and deserving of the respect of the American people. Thanks again for being with us. This is Al Palmer, Commander of the United States Navy, signing off. Good night.